Hello and welcome to today's webinar on customer experience trends. We're excited to have you all here today. My name is Shelby Bozakowski and I am the marketing manager at Bright Pattern. I'm going to be your moderator for today's webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover today. We're going to be discussing omnichannel, the growth of digital channels, as well as bots and AI, and a 360-degree view of the customer. Just a couple housekeeping items before we jump in. We are going to have a Q&A section at the end of the webinar. So at any point throughout the webinar, feel free to submit them through the Q&A panel and the Zoom webinar. And we're also recording today's session. So keep an eye out for an email later today or tomorrow with that recording. Feel free to send it to any colleagues that are also interested in the material. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to our panel today. We have Michael Pace, who's the founder of the Pace of Service, starting as a customer support manager for Tiffany & Co., Capital One, and Constant Contact. Michael has over 20 years of hands-on customer service experience. He's currently the director of Global Member Services at Virgin Pulse, the president of Northeast Contact Center Forum, and founder of the Pace of Service Consulting Services. Michael, do you want to say hi to everyone?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. And thank you very much, Shelby, for having me.
Absolutely. And our second panelist today is Jeff Marcuse, the VP of Marketing at TTEC. He is a marketing growth hack expert. He is a CX evangelist and MarTech expert. He brings entrepreneurial innovation to a big tech world. Jeff is a prominent customer experience and marketing speaker, as well as an adjunct professor of marketing for UC Irvine, Oregon State University, and Green Fig. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, everybody. Excited to talk about trends and what we're seeing today.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. And our third and final panelist today is the SVP of Marketing at Bright Pattern, Ted Hunting. Ted has led marketing at telecommunication and business intelligence startups, as well as enterprise tech companies. Most recently, before joining Bright Pattern, Ted led North America marketing at Genesis and was a member of the CCW Advisory Board and regular speaker at Gartner, Frost & Sullivan, Forrester events, and contact center trade shows with over 15 years of experience in the customer experience industry. Hey, Ted.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us, and hope you guys walk away with some great ideas, and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, guys. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into our first topic, which is omnichannel. So omnichannel has been a buzzword for several years, yet IQPC, Gartner, and Dimension Data all believe only 5 to 12% of companies provide true omnichannel. So my question to the panelists is, do you think that 2019 will be the year that contact centers start adopting omnichannel? And I'll go ahead and pass it over to Michael first.
Yeah, thanks, Shelby. I think I think they want to. I think there might even be some confusion on what exactly omnichannel is, and the difference between multi-channel and omnichannel and multimodal and such. I know, and I think it could be confusing to contact center leaders, and I know there's a couple of great experts on this panel who could probably define it even a little bit better.
Yeah, Jeff, do you want to jump in and provide your input?
Yeah, I mean, what I think I think let's start with the definition of it in that way, because I think if you ask people omnichannel, it's either a buzzword, it's a retail term, and not necessarily always thought about in the true kind of customer service engagement manner. But the way, at least I would define it, is I think you've got multi-channel, right? You have multiple ways in which you can engage with a brand. And then you have truly omni-channel, which is the way in which you are able to have a conversation with the customer on their terms, able to do channel shifts. So say we start on voice and I got to go pick up my kid, or I'm going to the recital and I can't talk, but we haven't resolved my issue yet, or I want to keep talking, I can shift to text, I can go to Messenger, a lot of different ways in which I can shift and pivot the conversation. And then I think there's even a level beyond, it's a maturity level with Omni, which is, how do you actually get more to that predictive omni-channel of how do you proactively as a brand start to engage through journey orchestration across those channels so you can do the right channel, right time, right message. And the tech is out there today to do that, but we are still seeing most brands stay kind of back at that multi-channel, and they haven't really even matured to that omni-channel space yet.
And Ted, what are you seeing?
I think actually, Shelby, what I find most interesting, and it's really probably this is the subject I'm most passionate about in this industry, is people have been literally clamoring for effortless personal conversations, what are truly omni-channel conversations for years, and that Dimension Data says like 8.4% of companies are doing it today. To me, there's no reason for this. We're really at a tipping point where the technology is there to fix the issue. From a definitional standpoint, though, I think it's great. Just to echo a little bit more of what Jeff was saying, is it originally was an IBM term in retailing, and then it gradually became a pretty prominent word throughout all of customer experiences. And as I see it, it's basically having a seamless, continuous conversation across channels where context is carried from channel to channel. So you actually have one seamless conversation. If you're heading on the website and then later you call in, the person knows who you are, why you were calling, and they have that context. And I think a big part of how you get to omnichannel is having agents, give them the ability in an omni-channel agent desktop where they can see every single step of the customer journey, every interaction. And so by empowering agents to be omni-channel and even switch channels if need be, that really helps the customers have that seamless conversation as well. So I think, really now's the time with cloud technology, omni-channel is possible. And I think the other thing that's really important is with the proliferation of new digital channels like Facebook Messenger and asynchronous messaging and other things we'll talk about a little bit later, there's new channels and we can't allow new channels to become new silos. So I think having the capability to make sure that you've got omni-channel happening today, but also be ready for tomorrow is important.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd add on to that, I think something that I'm watching is you've got consider your older established brands, and they grew up through this digital shift, right? They started when you used to simply put a phone number in a catalog, and that was how you got going, right? Pre.com days, and they matured through voice, they matured through email, they matured through text, social, push notifications, right? As you kind of go through that full spectrum of what's available now, and they very much so added kind of those siloed channels over time as it's fit their business needs, as they've seen their customers demand it, right? Those types of capabilities. And I think that's one of the problems is they've gone through that process of building their ecosystem of channels in a multi-channel way. And that's honestly a disadvantage compared to the newer, younger companies, right? The born in the cloud, quote unquote, ones of they're able to adopt these newer platforms very quickly from the get-go that have these full capabilities. And I think we're at a time now in which those brands that we all know and love have got to really take a look at it and say, is this now the time for us to do that kind of shift, to mature our technology, to mature our processes, to mature our strategy so that we can compete with these newer, younger companies who don't have necessarily that legacy infrastructure that they've built over many, many years. And I think that's just a different shift in where those companies are. And we kind of look at them very differently, at least from our side, of their maturity and how they've gone through that.
Hey, Jeff, just a comment. I really love what you're saying because it's interesting. It's not unlike how a lot of certain countries in the mobile world were able to leapfrog with like 3G, 4G, and newer technologies that are coming along. They actually were able to go from jump over inferior landlines into new ways to communicate with wireless technology, and they had advantages over some of the more advanced economies. And I think similarly, like what you're saying, it's an analogy. These nimble enterprises are able to leapfrog some of the established players who have that bolt-on technology. So it's pretty cool. It's now possible to really offer and enable true omni-channel. So I think that this is definitely, a tipping year for it to happen, Shelby. I think we're at a point where companies realize it's an imperative to win, and it's going to start happening more and more. That 12% at the high end is going to increase.
Yeah, I want to pick up, this is Mike, I want to pick up on something both of you guys said early on in your descriptions was how omnichannel really requires journey mapping and process management to be as a core piece. right? As we think about where our customers are, not only where they are physically, but also mentally, and what device they are on and what industry we're talking about, all that plays into, the larger circumstance and why omnichannel, is really the requirement of the future. And if you think of the use cases, where I just mentioned before, like you could be physically in a bank, physically online, physically in a bank, in a real line, not online. Like, remember lines when you're with people, those kinds of lines. And your mental state could be upset because you're in this line, right? And you could be tweeting at the bank, or you're wherever you're working or wherever you're trying to do, and you're looking for a real-time response, through Twitter. You also could be looking at someone who needs to give you a call because it's bank related, and you really can't have you can't really be sending that type of information over Twitter. And what are all the industry best practices? So looking at, I think, like I said, you both mentioned journey mapping. I think understanding where people are physically, where they are mentally, understanding what the best practices is for that particular, whether industry or environment, and then understanding the issue and what tool makes sense to apply to best serve those customers is critically important in an omnichannel environment.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. And I love the descriptions and the way you guys kind of define the difference between omnichannel and multi-channel. I think a lot of people aren't really aware of the differences. So with that, I want to do a polling question to the attendees, kind of asking if you consider yourself omni-channel, multi-channel, or voice only. So attendees, if you want to go ahead and submit your answers, I'll give you a little bit of time. And while we wait, panelists, I did get a little bit of feedback when Ted was talking. So if you wouldn't mind muting yourselves when you're not talking, I think we'll have a little bit clearer webinar. Thank you. So I'll give just a couple more seconds here if you want to get your answers in. Okay. So I'm sharing the poll right now. Let me know if you guys can't see it, panelists, but it looks like most people are kind of in that that multi-channel state, looking to get into omni-channel, with one being voice only. Panelists, do you have any thoughts on this?
I like it. It looks like we have a smart group of people on the webinar today, because we're clearly the 33% is really encouraging to see, because that's certainly a lot higher than the the 5 to 12% that most of the industry luminaries are quoting today.
Well, exactly. They're on a webinar around trends. I love it. They're actually looking forward on it. I think one thing that's really interesting too, and I think it's a thing that's kind of been holding some groups back of getting to omni-channel, is one of the barriers, at least that I've observed, is to some extent the relationship between marketing and kind of the customer service side. And very often marketing is the one engaging on the social channels. Marketing is the one who pushed out chat on the website through that, and they feel they own those connections. They feel they own potentially that mobile connection with push notifications as well. And very often there's a cultural barrier or a silo that can happen that needs to be overcome, because it's about a customer communication strategy and a prospect communication strategy as you go through those different things there. And I think that's kind of one of the things too that I'm seeing is, to Mike's point there earlier on, journey mapping is so critical, but very often marketing is the only one who does it in an organization. How do you roll that out across the entire customer journey, the entire customer lifecycle experience, and how do you break down some of those silos? So I'm not surprised to see those numbers, but I do love that we have some that are well on their way to being omni-channel.
And Jeff, I love what you're saying. It's interesting. it's not just the technology silos that are creating the problem, it's the organizational silos. I think that's one reason we've even seen the emergence of some of these new titles like head of digital channels, especially I think it started at mostly at some larger financial institutions, but because you essentially need somebody when marketing owns the app or marketing owns the web chat, and that in itself creates some of the silos too. So really having an omni-channel view and a direction at a very high level of strategically in the company is equally important, if not more so, than the technology itself.
Great. I think we should go to the next topic then, which is go where your customers are. This really talks about the growth of digital channels, mobile, AR, VR. I mean, companies are realizing how necessary it is to be where your customers are, and customers are expecting that seamless experience over their more mobile devices. So, panel, do you see companies implementing more mobile channels in 2019? And if so, which mobile channels and why? I'll go ahead and pass it over to Ted first to speak on mobile.
Yeah, so just a couple comments. I know I can tell we're all excited about omnichannel because we spent a lot of time on that one. It's a pretty exciting topic. So I'll try to tighten things up a little here so we can get on into all the topics. I think one of the most interesting things today is, as we all know, for good or bad, we're on the go all the time. I mean, and really the customer experience needs to be where you are, which in all too many instances today is on your mobile device. And, I think you look at some of the very innovative companies like Microsoft who've really gone with a full all-in mobile push, and a lot of other companies. COPC did a nice study last year where they indicated that in the coming year, they saw mobile customer care increasing by 41%. So I think one of the keys is to make sure you offer as many of these even omni-channel type experiences for people who are on the go. So for example, a lot of times when you go into a company's app, probably because, going back to the silos that Jeff had indicated organizationally, you might have the marketing people own the app. And so when someone wants to contact the company, they just get sent to the generic company IVR where it asks them what language they want to speak, instead of saying, hey, Jeff, noticed you were last in our app, checking out this item you wanted to purchase. Can we route you to someone to help with that, who's specially skilled to help you with that purchase? So I think having omni-channel even within the app. So the capability today, we have one of our very innovative unicorn customers in Asia. They're sort of like an Airbnb of the travel industry, if you will. And they're looking to put in place a lot of in-app messaging. So for example, having the ability to do a text chat, a video chat for people who are on the go from a travel standpoint, even being able to share pictures like a Google map on where to get to something, or even things like a ticket. So having the ability to share documents, pictures, chat, video chat within an app, I think is key, and it's very possible today. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And then the final comment is, chat is such a big channel, but there's a lot of predictions that asynchronous messaging, where you can have a persistent, continuous conversation, like in a text message, for example, with a company, and you sort of do it when you can. So maybe you start chatting with them in the morning on the train, and you finish up later in the evening when you're home with a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or whatever. So I think asynchronous messaging is going to be another really big growing trend that's going to be surpassing chat even.
Great, thank you, Ted. And Jeff, you had an interesting perspective on AR and VR, if you want to talk a little on that.
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting is I view those as techs that brands need to be watching, right? As we go through that, we're starting to see Microsoft just had a recent release, right? HoloLens 2, increased field of view. There's a huge application around the field services aspect of that. But you can also think to customers. We're not too far out in the future of when I call in per se, maybe all of a sudden I've got somebody walking me through the steps to fix my washer, or I've got somebody showing me how to fix this thing in my home, and they're actually using augmented reality to do that, or customer training through VR in that space to kind of bring people into immersive environments or training or showcasing them different components. So I think they're trends brands should be watching. There are definitely applications, in particular around AR for particular companies, especially as we're seeing that with our phones and what the potential of vision analytics can do, that we're seeing come out of Google and others in the space. So definitely some trends to be watching, and there are some definite service level engagements that are going to be on the horizon with those. What's also interesting just on this overall category that's worth keeping in mind is this varies very much so brand to brand, right? What are your demographics? What are your psychographics? If your audience is going to be very different if you are targeting, you know, boomers and older than if you're targeting millennials, right? They want to engage in different ways. They're comfortable with different types of channels as you go through that. And so it's a really important thing to keep in mind too while you're going through your customer selection is how do your user personas, your buyer personas, your actual customers want to engage with you, and where are they? Where are they already showing up? Because you want to minimize that customer effort and not make them necessarily learn a new channel if it's not their natural behavior, unless there's a huge advantage to doing so. I could spend all day on this topic, but yeah, definitely AR, VR is a trend we're watching as it comes in, and one we think certain brands should be watching pending the industry.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And Michael, what are your thoughts on this topic?
I don't know if there could be a more exciting, you know, topic than, you know, thinking about how you can start applying some of these things. So I think years ago, you know, if you had a problem with your computer at your desktop, you know, somebody could log into your computer and you almost virtually hand over your mouse and they could fix things. And we still use that today. But now imagine that with your cable provider and setting up your router at home, right? And they could see, because you have a mobile device, you know, whether it be a tablet or a phone or other, right? And how, you know, the assistance, how they'll be able to assist customers, whether they're fixing something or setting up something, or, you know, I can imagine myself with a million times I could have called IKEA to help me fix something, by just, you know, showing which part I think I'm missing and have them help me put it in. You know, where this could go from the help side, you know, it's really pulling the customer and the brand so much closer together, because you could be anywhere and doing anything, you know, and with the advent of kind of mobile and video and, you know, sort of that real-time assistant, there's so many places this could go, and how helpful it could be is really amazing.
Great, thanks. I love your IKEA example. That brings back some memories of setting up furniture. So on to the next topic, bots and AI. So spending on AI has increased significantly in the last few years. 60% of C-level executives say they plan to increase AI spending by 50% over last year. And a survey by Spiceworks revealed that 40% of large businesses will implement AI and bots in 2019. So panel, I'm curious, what use cases have you seen for AI? And what specific features do you see as being useful to contact centers today? I'll go ahead and pass it over to Michael first.
Sure. So I think the most common one that people have seen, and I think people have witnessed in day-to-day life, is the chatbot. A great, simple tool. And simple also from the brand standpoint, to be able to stand up and get moving and get, you know, quote unquote learning, is getting that chatbot up and having those bots assist your customers, whether it be, you know, in chat or on social media. I do think there's also a ton of I think the next step you'll see more for the brands on the contact center side are things like workforce management that's aided by you know, machine learning and AI, and then I do think longer term you really start getting into looking at how bots and AI could lead to what I would call preventive service. So if, whether it's an IoT device or, you know, your car or what have you, and, you know, if it knows it's going to need servicing at a certain period of time, how does that kind has that bot and the machine learning kind of work together with your broader customer data to provide a preventive solution, before the issue happens, or before the filter goes bad, or before the oil runs out, or before the part doesn't work. Longer term, I think that preventative service is going to be even much bigger than the bots that we're seeing in chat today. And but at the same time, Skynet is not launching. Arnold Schwarzenegger is not walking through that door as the Terminator. We're still pretty early in this life cycle. There's a ton of ways for brands to get, just dipping their toes in the space, and to start to learn how to, get on the bot trend and the AI trends.
Great, thank you. Jeff, what is TTEC seeing, and do you have any good use cases or kind of tips for our attendees?
Yeah, we're definitely doing a lot in this space, and I think there's a really good point there on. I think we're going to see this grow a lot more, in particular as we're watching kind of 5G and the Internet of Things, and that's always connected in all your devices from that predictive side of the house. But where like our practical use cases where we're actually seeing some substantial value are. And where our customers are seeing value are in one area around RPA, right? Robotic process automation, the back office, getting some of those simple things, those tier 1 requests, simple things like password resets and whatnot, where the bot can execute it. I just used ours the other day. My password had expired, and it was super easy to go and fix it, and wasn't, didn't take anybody's time. So back office and RPA is a definite area where we're seeing brands get a lot of value out of that. Also on a little bit different type of bot where we're seeing a huge uptick is in what we call associate assist, which is essentially a bot that's able to listen in and on the conversations that your associates are having, and then is proactively pulling up the knowledge base and suggesting articles and resolution types and empowering the associates to email them, text out those answers, and find them. So it's really enhancing, first call resolution. Your average handle time's going down because your associates aren't having to go and do essentially that Google search on your knowledge base to get the answer. So proactively pulling those things through. We're seeing huge application of these in simulated learning and training, so decreasing nesting time and essentially training time for associates to put them in real world environments with essentially a no-lose situation for the brand because it's a bot, right? And so it can respond and react to the associate. You can put them under pressure from an angry customer or a happy customer, and all those kinds of aspects. And then the other is obviously the ones that I think everybody thinks of, which are like the chatbot front end type stuff where they're looking at it and saying, engaging with customers with clicking bubbles and things like that. I'm seeing huge applications of that on the sales and marketing side of the house in self-service bots as well. But where we've seen brands break down when they don't think about it effectively is you don't want the bot to become simply the new IVR jail, right? We've all had that experience, press one, as we go through that. And the bot needs to have the ability to transfer with context and escalate to a human as you go through that process. And we saw a lot of initial Facebook bots get launched. And I think about 70% of them had been turned off because it was essentially just a new IVR jail and it was a bad experience. But what we're seeing is around 69% of customers just simply want the answer as fast as they possibly can, and it needs to be the right answer. And they have no issue interacting with a bot, but the bot has to be quality enough that it can actually deliver on kind of that promise. So those are kind of the big scenarios and applications we're seeing, but also some of the gotchas that we're watching out for.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, there's Ted likes to call them brighter bots. They can't just be dumb bots. They need to actually know what they're doing. Ted, before I pass it over to you, I'm actually going to open up the next polling questions just so that we can give enough time to the attendees to submit their answers. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that now. And Ted, now if you want to give your feedback on AI and bots, that'd be great.
Great. Thank you, Shelby. I think actually Michael and Jeff covered it very well, but just a few belated points. So I think the first one is, I love, Jeff, your term IVR jail. You know, everybody wants self-service, like 95% of customers want it, but if you ask how many want to deal with an IVR, virtually no one will raise their hand. So I think one of the first takeaways is that we can't allow this shiny new object called bots to be seen as silos and really be inflexible like a bad IVR. So I think having not rushing to the shiny new object of bots and implementing them as silos is sort of a key takeaway. Gartner is predicting, I think, that 40% of the bots deployed last year are going to be yanked out due to poor CSAT, dumb bots, if you will, not good bots. The other thing is, I think ultimately, I love the Skynet reference, because I think with the 5G that Jeff also mentioned, there's a whole new world. There's a vice president at ADP that I was talking with last year, and I love to paraphrase him. He mentioned there is no CX center anymore. CX is everywhere. And you know, the days when you know, our Apple Watch that I'm looking at right now, that I don't think mine does blood pressure yet, but it probably will if I get the new one. But imagine having the device knowing your blood pressure and then using AI and routing to send a text message to your nurse, for example, if you've got, you know, a health issue. I think there's going to be an incredible new world of, you know, literally life-changing CX, and that use case that'll come. But bringing it down to, you know, more of the current state, number one, making sure the bots are not deployed as silos, and doing really, you know, as Jeff mentioned, all context passed on, what Forrester calls blended AI, where bots and humans can work together, not at odds, and where basically the bot does the basic triage of basic information and then is escalated to a human for you know, the human interaction. So let bots do what they can do best, let humans do what they can do best. And then in terms of AI deployment, I think there's still a lot of confusion about, there's so many different platforms and technologies. And I know reading some of what Gartner talks about is having sort of a best of breed AI approach. For example, at Bright Pattern, within our platform, we've got, you know, Google, we've got Amazon, we got Lex, we've got IBM Watson, and we're going to have Microsoft shortly, but really giving a very open approach to AI and let companies use the AI they prefer. We have, you know, in one instance, we have a customer who is using Google Analytics within our platform integrated because it handles languages a little bit better than one of the other platforms that I won't name. So having the ability to have really an open AI approach where you can leverage best of breed AI is key. And the last comment is, I've noticed in talking to a lot of enterprises, there's a lot of companies that are reluctant to deploy bots externally to customers, but to use Jeff's assist terminology. Seeing companies where they're using the AI to help their employees. So if someone says, hey, I'm interested in going to Maui, maybe on a Facebook Messenger or a chat or whatever, an email, and giving the agent through things like Watson or Google, for example, suggested responses that might suggest, hey, you might want to consider this hotel, you might want to consider this hotel. So I think having a lot of the AI really assisting agents and assisting people in the company is going to be, is probably a great way to get started, especially for companies that are hesitant to deploy an externally facing bot. And then finally, I mentioned IVRs and how horrible they can be. But one of the cool technologies now is these new conversational IVRs, where when you call in, and AI is used to help route you. So you're not limited by a rigid tree of choices or press 1, press 2, press 3, but you actually can tell the IVR, if you will, what you're looking for, and then the AI will help make that a much lower effort and easier experience.
Great, thank you, Ted. And just to add on to that, there are a couple of customers of Bright Pattern that are using chatbots in pretty unique ways. And I'll just share those with you because it kind of shows how you can use it in a way that you might not think possible, or kind of be creative in the way that you use it. And one of our customers is Madison Reed. And they had found that they had a lot of shopping cart abandonment when people, so they're an online hair coloring kit where you order it and they ship it to your house. And they had a lot of shopping cart abandonment and realized it was because people needed help. They weren't sure which kind of hair coloring they needed. And they launched this bot on Facebook Messenger where you can actually submit your photo and it'll identify your hair color in the photo, and it'll give you a couple of recommendations. And what's really nice about it is if the bot isn't working, or if you still want that live interaction, throughout the entire interaction, they had a button in order to escalate it to a live agent. And then the second example is a customer that this is still in progress, but they're launching what's called a pizza bot. And it's for one of their pizza delivery companies. And all you have to do is send in an emoji of a pizza. And if you're already in their system and have a preference for what pizza you typically order, all you have to do is send in that emoji and it'll be delivered to your house. So pretty cool technology. And I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Not that many of our viewers submitted their answer, but that's okay. It still kind of gives us a good idea of where people are at. So I'm going to share those results. And panelists, do you have any thoughts on what shows up? Looks like most people are in the 0 to 6 month frame where they're looking at it, they're wanting it, but don't currently have it. And there's a couple more further out, 1 to 2+ years.
Yeah, I think across the board, I'm hearing that this is a core initiative in 2019. Brands are looking at it. They see the promise of it. There was an article that came out of Davos, I think it was in the New York Times, that said, the secret conversation that's happening among CEOs is around how do we use bots to start to automate and augment the workforce? Not necessarily the most popular conversation on that side. But we do know that this is a huge initiative for brands. They see potential cost savings. They see CX enhancement, because then the associates that they do have can be higher skilled, deal with higher value interactions, all those kinds of things, and they can deflect and automate away most of those tier 1 simple things that take a lot of time as you go through that. So I'm not surprised to see that 0 to 6 months. I think pretty much every brand I work with is exploring this actively and has 1, 2, 3 pilots underway as they're going through it, but nobody's really got it humming along perfectly well yet today. I think even the companies that do have bots and AI in place are still figuring out, how do we optimize? Are they operating how we want them to? How do we justify their cost? All those different kinds of things.
Yeah, I do think also the folks who are putting in the 2+ years will probably find that bots will be pretty ubiquitous by that point. If you look at the pace of things like, in 2000, we were on websites and nobody was ever going to call again. And, about 10 years back, it was, social is going to take over everything. And it has, but differently than I think we thought. And because the pace of technology is just so exponential, that we're going to have more interactions. Bot interactions will be, pretty ubiquitous and, very commonplace, and they'll be in a lot more places than, just your contact center, but, everywhere from your supermarket to your, auto dealer and such.
And just a final thought, really relating to the vendor community. I think, as we saw with Omnichannel, quite often the vendors are, the buzzword comes out and everybody's talking about it and very few people are doing it. I actually think that it's very, it puts the onus on the vendor community of technology to make sure that we bring forward specific use cases where AI can help people with their customer experience. And I think that's really key. It's something we're definitely trying to do here at Bright Pattern. So for example, giving someone like the assist example, where if someone's chatting with an agent and the AI is providing suggestions to the agent to empower them and make them better able to serve the customers, I think is a key part. The other thing is even, having, best of breed AI built into the system where it's detecting in real time the sentiment of a given interaction is really important as well, because then within your journey orchestration engine, we'll set something up, for example, like if sentiment is low, find a retention specialist skill set and route them with, priority 1 to that person, along with the recording of the interaction. So the ability to act in real time, having AI detect and then route and act on those things in real time is really key, I think, with AI as well. So coming up with some specific use cases from the vendor community that can help our customers with using AI in a very ROI-driven way, in a very specific way, I think is really key. It's the onus is on the vendor community to help our customers with this.
Ted, I think you bring up I totally forgot one of the most innovative and exciting products I've seen recently is real-time conversational AI being put to use. So where when agents pause too long, systems can actually tell them, you're putting people on, pause too long, or your voice is escalating, or the customer's voice is escalating. Therefore, you need to pull yours down. And there's companies out there now who are syncing up with telephony systems to provide that real time, for lack of a better word, almost quality management. I think we're so used to doing quality management, post call and surveying in that way. Think of the power of being able to do real time quality management. I completely forgot that as one of the areas I am so excited about seeing.
And not to Michael, I don't want to get into Bright Pattern technology because this is an informational webinar, but that's actually what I'm really excited about, because with our omnichannel quality management we're releasing next month, we're looking at making sure we have the ability to detect, and this actually gets into the 360-degree view of the customer a little bit. I know we're going to talk about it momentarily, but having the ability to see like sentiment or CSAT or NPS by channel, by customer segment, or by journey type, and being able to act in real time. Gartner indicates that about 70% of companies track the journey, but they do it after the fact when it's too late to act. And the Gartner CEO, Gene Hall, talks about the importance of the companies that will be the winners, the disruptors versus disrupted are the companies who can act in the moment. And so this real-time omni-channel quality management that we're actually getting ready to release, where you can detect sentiment, route in real time, but win a transaction. It's almost like a simple Lyft or Uber survey. How would you rate this ride? I was actually talking to a vice president of customer experience at Lyft last year, and if you put in like 3, it gets routed to someone immediately for follow-up. So that's saying, and then I know a healthcare company that's doing something very similar as well. So it's interesting to see 2 very different industries taking the same best practice to act in the moment, and having AI that can really help with that quality management. It's a really exciting new area. Really gets back to that predictive that Jeff talked about at the beginning of the conversation on omnichannel.
It's all very interesting. Thank you guys for all of your input on that. For the next topic, we are talking about the 360-degree view of the customer. In today's era of customer centricity, customers no longer have to make compromises. They can confidently demand experiences that are frictionless and personal. An organization cannot meet this demand without a 360-degree view of its customers and their journey. How important do you think it is to have this 360-degree view, and how do you think companies can achieve it? I'll go over to Jeff first.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things that the marketing department's been working on for a long time, right? We've got all these amazing tools that give us data enrichment, and they give us account-based marketing, and we know our customers where they're at. We can target the ad channels that they're on, etc. I think brands have done a pretty poor job of tying this into what I would call a real 360-degree view, which ties in sales and right customer service as you go through those parts. So it's incredibly important, because you need to understand your customer. You need to understand their preferences. You need to understand their profitability and lifetime value to you. You need to understand their churn risk to your brand. And all of those things come together to then inform how essentially you should treat them as a customer as you go through those aspects. So it's incredibly important. Where we see some of the breakdowns happen is obviously on the data silos and data platform side of the house. Marketing's has some interesting technologies that are out there. I will say I'm very excited about the open data initiative that Adobe and Microsoft and SAP have pushed out. I think that's going to help a lot on starting to break down some of these silos and their common data schema. But pulling that all together and then making it actionable. How do you actually have the information show up in front of your reps? as you go through that without being creepy. For a while, we did this with a telco, and basically what we found was we didn't necessarily gain any efficiencies by having all this additional information, because to not be creepy, the rep had to ask all the information still anyways. And so there's this nuance of having the information, but then how do you action against it? But this is where you're going to need this information to get to that predictive, to get to that next best offer, next best action, proactive customer service, and really bringing it together. So really critical. Data platform's key. There's some new initiatives coming out from some big brands that are going to hopefully unlock this a little bit. But curious the other panelists' thoughts on this area as well.
Yeah, Ted, how do you think that companies can achieve this 360-degree view?
This is it's interesting. What I love about each of these topics, we could probably drill down and really get into each of these and spend a lot more time. But just at a high level, I think one of the key items is from a recommendation is I really like the concept of an omni-channel agent desktop, where you have all that current view of the customer's current journey at the agent's fingertips. And then also the ability to look at previous journeys if need be. Really interesting comment. I know, Shelby, when we were at CCW Nashville, the winter event, and there was a journey mapping session that we led, and there was a gentleman from one of the major hotel chains, Hyatt, and he had indicated, Hilton, and he had indicated that his agents have 11 desktops, so basically to see what's happening, and they're moving away from that. So having an omni-channel agent desktop where you can make it easy for the agents to see the relevant information, I think is key. I think another part, I like what Jeff just said about creepy. That was a phrase I first heard at a Gartner event a couple of years ago. They were recommending that you need to be personal but not be creepy. And I think the world we're moving toward it's going to be more and more of an opt-in world, where people will be willing to give up information to maybe get better service, but it's going to have to be done by request. So I think that's going to be part of that as well, to get to that predictive type of journey. And then last comment is, it really relates to what we were just getting into with Michael when we were chatting on this omni-channel quality management, this idea to be able to act in the moment. Information after the fact, when it's too late, is too late. And having the ability to even we don't want to have survey fatigue. We all have seen these surveys that just are very high effort and they're not frictionless. And so I think having the ability, though, that after every interaction to offer just a simple 1 to 5 star breadcrumb survey. How was your interaction on this chat? How was your interaction on that call, on that text message interaction? And if you have those breadcrumbs and you make it very easy for the customer just to touch and provide their feedback, you can then start to, as you look at journey history by channel or by customer segment or by journey type, like a TV sale versus a refrigerator sale versus support, you can then start to see where there's low sentiment or low NPS or CSAT in that journey, and then you can start to take those bumpy roads, if you will, those bumps in the roads that have CSAT issues, and then you can start to smooth out those bumps in the road. So having the information, making it easier for customers to provide breadcrumbs that will let you see where there are bumps in the road, I think are really key. But we have to do it in a way that we make it easy for customers, and we need to make it easy for our agents, and we need to make it easier for our businesses. Even at the macro level, if you could actually see, here's the number of bot interactions, here's the number of call interactions, here's the number of text message interactions, and then for each of these, show the NPS or the sentiment. That type of wallboard, I think is very helpful, because then you can identify the bad interactions, the ones that are going south, and then you can act in real time to address them. And I think having these common data models, that Jeff just mentioned are a part of that as well.
Yeah, I was going to just jump in here. I think most brands are getting the 360-degree view, I don't want to say wrong, but if they're thinking about it, I suggest thinking about it a little bit differently. So I think most folks do transactional experiences well. It's, I call, a company to buy something, it gets delivered, fine. Now that's just a single transaction. The next level up, I would call something like account-based transactions, where, you order something, and the person who's helping you can see that you've ordered, you ordered a red purse recently. Does it make sense to get the wallet bag or what have you, right? So it's moving from transactional to account based. And then, the next step down from that is sort of your brand experience. And this includes, that marketing stuff on the front end. It includes the individual transactions. It includes all your transactions sort of combined in that larger account space. It includes, your referrals and such. And then, the last final piece of it is more just like real life, right? So this is transactional and account and brands and how brands interact with other brands together. Think of your, walking into Best Buy and you're cyber shopping with your phone as you're looking at, things at Best Buy. And, it's people's real lives are a lot more than a single brand. But brands are still stuck in sort of transactional. Some are doing a better job on the account, sort of on the account level. Great companies are doing brand experience, and the really forward-looking ones are looking at how does my brand complement real life, and that's why 360 is a tough goal to get to. I'd rather think of it a little bit. I don't know, transactional to real life is more linear, but I think it just explains the steps, I think, more.
Yeah, I think I'd just add one last comment here. I know I'm conscious of time. I think that's a big thing that I had an aha in my career around, just that whole concept of kind of big data. And I think there's a big issue is brands have a ton of data, right? There's no shortage of data. But where I really get into it is what's the significant data that would help you answer, these 3 questions. And if you could answer those 3 questions, it would transform your business, right? Or would transform your customer experience. And really focusing on what is the data that you need to answer those questions and starting to get that around your customers. You go through that. Case in point, when I was at Microsoft, we were doing this for a sports team and trying to help them sell season tickets. And you would target very differently a single individual who bought, 2 tickets for him and his buddy than you would a family with different messages because their information about them was very different. So one of the questions we wanted to answer was, what were those motivators? We were doing it for a home improvement store of, what are those key, if we could identify the key moments in time in their life that they're more likely to buy from us. And it was, wedding, moving, there are a couple different other scenarios, what would be the compelling offer or event we could get in front of them to drive that footfall in those areas. And so that obviously required some data enrichment, but it was really getting into that. What is the significant data? What are the questions that we need to be able to answer to really transform our CX or transform our offerings as we go through that process? I think that's a kind of a good point, Mike, you're bringing up there, is it's not always just about as much data as you possibly could have on somebody, because otherwise you'll just be drowning in data. You need it to actually help you be smarter and act on it.
Needs to be actionable. Great. Thank you, guys. Before we jump into the Q&A section, I am going to pass it over to Ted just for a quick minute to give a little overview of Bright Pattern and also thank our sponsors.
Yeah, thank you guys very much for joining. I don't want this to be a commercial for Bright Pattern, but just very quickly, a lot of people might not know who we are. Cloud Contact Center software. The people who created the company were the original engineering team who created the Genesis product, and the CEO who took Genesis public is my boss, Michael McCloskey. So a lot of great DNA here, and really we're on a mission to really make customer experiences easier and faster and truly omni-channel. So that's really what our focus is all about. So a lot of people who are passionate about customer experience. It's time, I think, that the omni-channel, the 33% that we saw encouragingly from the survey today, we need to see that permeate the entire customer experience. So just wanted to provide a little quick update on who Bright Pattern is, and appreciate you guys joining us very much today, and also very much appreciate some great ideas. I really, just exciting to hear, Jeff and Michael, your thoughts on this. It's an industry that you get into and you don't really leave there's so much great stuff happening. And I really think we're just at the beginning of a whole new world of, predictive, personalized omnichannel. It's coming up, and with IoT and all these other things that we're talked about today, I think we're on the beginning of what's a really exciting time in the industry. So thank you all for joining us and giving us an opportunity to share some ideas.
Great. So we are running short on time, but we do have a couple of minutes for questions. Ted, you provided some good clarification on what true omnichannel is, and everyone seems to be talking about it, but few are actually doing it. What is the best way to get started?
So this is a great one. I actually, one thing that I've learned, and it's not my words of wisdom, I've learned it from customers that I've worked with over the years. And there's also a journey analyst from Forrester who lives in Europe that this is her view as well. And basically, I think of it as sort of like the 80-20 rule for omnichannel. Like, a lot of people want to boil the omnichannel ocean and get involved in every channel. And to me, the key is, get your top 2 channels working as one. And typically people today are starting on websites, like with web chat. So in most cases, it's getting your web chat working with your next most important channel, which is, maybe voice, it may be text, whatever, email, whatever it may be for your business. So really getting those top 2 channels working as one seamless conversation is really the great starting point, the 80-20 rule. And then later, add other channels. So don't be overwhelmed by the ocean of omnichannel, but just get started. And I actually think a key part of that is you need a platform, whether you build it yourself or you buy it. And obviously cloud gives you the ability to be very nimble as new channels come out. The platform is going to always be current. So I think a cloud type of direction, I think, is a great way to get started. Obviously, I'm a vendor, so you might think, well, of course, Ted's going to say that, but I actually very much believe that's the way you break down the silos. You need to have a platform approach to really offer omnichannel capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Great. And another question, what is the biggest barrier to companies making the shift to omnichannel? I'll have all of the panelists quickly answer this one. We'll go to Michael first.
Biggest is process and journey mapping. I think companies who understand their customer's journey and have focused on the discipline of process management are the ones who are really moving forward in the space. If you're not focused on how to work with your customers, it's going to be a lot more difficult to do Omni.
And Jeff?
I think I'd add on to that, actually understanding how your customers want to talk to you is a big one that a lot of brands, they have an opinion, but they don't actually have an answer from that side, and just missing that voice of customer. I think the other part that we've seen is just, especially for those older brands, not the born in the cloud ones, there's a legacy investment that IT is not apt to quickly go spend more money on a new platform, right? You've made investments in physical switches and hardware and software and all these kinds of things that you may still be paying for from your CFO perspective, and or frankly you might be still in contract around certain things. And so sometimes that can be a barrier, is sometimes just the logistical nature of investments and contractual commitments as well. But definitely at least understanding how your customers want to talk to you is a key one too that I see brands often miss.
Absolutely. And Ted, what do you see as the biggest barrier?
I think actually everything that was just said is great. I would add one other thought to this, is I think it's really having an omni-channel direction from on high in the company to help break down some of the silos. A great example is there's a woman I know who recently retired, but she was the customer experience officer at a retail brand here in California that everyone would know. And she basically, they started off every board meeting where she was the first person on the agenda. And she was a very, very smart and a great leader. So she was able to basically bring the different groups together, like the people who own the website, the people who own sales, people who own marketing. And this was a primary topic. The company was focused very much on the customer experience and offering an omni-channel customer experience, and having almost like a weekly or a monthly get together where you bring in the different heads of the different business units together. And you have almost a little bit of where are we seeing friction in our customer experience, and really making it a company priority. So organizationally is key You can have the best technology, but if you don't have the silos broken down organizationally as well, it's not going to happen.
Great. Thank you guys. So we are out of time. There were other questions. So if you submitted a question that we didn't get to, we will be reaching out today or tomorrow to get that answer to you. Like I said at the beginning of the webinar, this is recorded, so we will be sharing that as well as our latest 2019 Contact Center Trends Special Report. So keep an eye out for both of those items in your email either today or tomorrow. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you to all of the panelists. Thank you to all of the attendees that joined today. And I hope you all have a fantastic day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shelby. Thanks, guys.